Hey everybody, what's up? This is Andrew, and in this video, we're going to take a little bit look at something more theoretical. We're going to talk about how to develop a testing strategy, a testing strategy for you and your teammates to get better at card games in general. This whole video will focus on Eternal, but I think you can apply it to a bunch of other digital card games and paper card games that you play. So right here's this outline that I've developed. You'll be able to find a link to this as a Google Doc in the comments below, as well as you'll find a link to my Twitch, where I stream every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday in the evenings. This guide, as I said, is very theoretical. It's very top-down, broad picture. A lot has been written about testing strategy, mostly from like your Magic the Gatherings, Yu-Gi-Ohs, Pokemons, but there's not been a lot written on the Eternal side. You have a lot of good deck techs and a lot of good resources in the community, and I think this guide will hopefully give you an idea on where to start and how to collate all those things together. And so we break it down to a few big steps, and the first big step is establish your goals. I think this is true for like maybe literally everything in life, but without a well-defined goal plan, testing is just a bit too vague. And I think that's one of the reasons you might actually be watching a video like this, is if you're like, I know that testing is a thing that competitive card game players do. I just don't know what that means to me or what it looks like. So establishing goals is the first big thing. What do I want to get out of this practice of testing, right? And as I say here, it's the most crucial and important step. If you don't have goals, you're absolutely, I agree with this. I wrote it 30 seconds ago, but I absolutely still agree with it. You're absolutely wasting time. If I don't know why I'm doing the things I'm doing, I'm just spinning air. I'm just grinding, and grinding for the sake of grinding isn't any good. So there is a bunch of different goals that you could have, and especially in a game like Eternal, your goals can be as like complex as I want to qualify for Worlds, or they can be as, you know, great as I want to get into Masters in a format I haven't done it before, or even getting Masters in any format for the first time, if that's a thing you haven't done. Those are all good goals. For example, right now, my goal is probably to make day 2 of an ECQ. I've been back at Eternal for a month and a half, and I'm really starting to get back into the grind of it. So my goal is to make day 2 of an ECQ. And how you do that is you develop your testing strategy with your goal in mind. So without a goal, you can't develop a testing strategy. And the testing strategy for a person that wants to make day 2 of an ECQ is going to be very different than the testing strategy of a person that just wants to get Masters, or of a person that just wants to get Masters in all of the gauntlets and the Forge battles, right? These are very different plans that we're going to develop because of this goal. So you should set that out right now, write it on a piece of paper. There's a bunch of good videos and guides out there on how to do goal planning, and maybe I'll do one of those in the future, but develop a goal before you even start. Honestly, pause the video, write down your goal, and then come back. Okay, you're back. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to want to develop a testing community. In this testing community, you want to develop it with people who have similar things in line with your goals, as you see up here. So you developed your goals in step 1, and in step 2, you're going to develop a group of friends and a community that's going to help you achieve those goals. The cool thing about digital TCGs online is that there's a bunch of different ways to find a testing group. You have Reddit, Twitter, Discord, streams, Twitches, like messaging chat. There's a bunch of different ways for you to find people that have similar goals to you. And you can develop these expectations in your testing community. So I'm not going to pair up with a person that just wants to make Masters in a format, because we're going to have very different ideas. We're not necessarily going to be speaking the same language or having the same objectives throughout our testing process. So one of us is going to end up being very frustrated by the way things go. Likely both of us are going to be frustrated. So the next step is to develop a community of people that you can test with. This step might be hard for people that either game in isolation, or they like the fact that they play digital TCG, so they don't have to interact with other people. I totally get that, and I think that's a fair response. Eternal and digital TCGs are great because of the ladders, and because in Eternal specifically, you have the casual practice ladder, so you can practice games against the ladder opponents without actually risking your rank, and I think that's really important. That being said, goals are still going to be the big thing you run into. You're going to play people playing meme decks that they wouldn't play in a tournament if your goal is to make day 2 of an ECQ. You're going to play against people that are trying to qualify for Worlds if your goal is just to get Masters in a new format. So you're going to have a little bit of overlapping experiences that may be frustrating if you don't have this develop a testing community. Once you have this testing community developed, it's important that you develop the right procedures, big pictures procedures within your testing community. I've kind of boiled these down to 5 steps, and we'll talk about the 6th thing that I've written down here in a second. But the first step in this is, so you have your goal, and now you want to give your goal a date. So let's say you want to hit Masters in a month, as I give an example here. If you want to hit Masters in a month, what you need to do is put that date at the end of the month. So because the leagues run out at the end of the month, right? You're trying to say, all right, by January 31st, I want to hit Masters. And what that does is it gives you a context. It says, all right, I have this card pool to work with. I have this time constraints. I need to do this much a day to get ready. If you're trying to get day 2 of an ECQ, well, you need to know when the ECQ is, right? You need to know, is the new set going to be out by the time the ECQ is here, and I'll have to brew brand new decks, or can I test the thing I've been working on this whole time? The ECQ dates are a little bit more fixed than Masters, because Masters, you can have the whole month, but ECQ says, no, your work has to be completed by this point, and you'll have this card frame in mind. Without this, it's a little bit ambiguous. You know, if you're just like, I want to hit Masters sometime, well, you could hit Masters in August or September, and as we sit here in January, it's not really that helpful, right? Like, you have 7 months to do your goal, in the goal that could be accomplished in a month. So it kind of gives more of a, just jammed my microphone. It gives a little bit more of a context and a little bit more of a time frame and set work period to do. So that's an important step that I think people might overlook. I want to make sure you get your dates in your calendars. And the next thing you do, and this is where the real meat of testing comes in, is you're going to develop your meta. You're going to determine your meta decks that are the most popular in your respective format. So this is where going to be referred to as your gauntlet, not the gauntlet that you play to get some easy gold every once in a while, but the gauntlet that you play, that you're going to play all of your tested decks against. You're going to use things like Eternal Warcry, Discord, tournament deck lists, streamers that are popularizing decks, and figure out what you expect the decks in the room to be on that particular tournament you do. Or if you're trying to ladder, for example, what decks you expect to see on ladder. In brand new metas, as I say here, there's not going to be those things. Like, we have a new set that drops in a month, right? You won't be able to just look at deck lists and go, these are going to be the decks. You'll have to use some of your intellect and some of your card game knowledge rather, and make educated guesses about what types of decks are going to show up. And it's these decks, like I said, that are going to form your gauntlet for you to test against. And the next step after you have, let's say you find 3 lists. Let's say you find blue-red spells, the blue-black mill deck, and Combrei aggro, right? You're going to then identify, brainstorm, and develop ideas to either improve these decks or develop decks that beat these decks. That's a really big statement that I make in one sentence. This is the meat and bones. I think step C and step D are the meat and bones of the testing process. I'm going to say, okay, what beats Combrei aggro? What beats the blue-black mill deck? What beats the blue-red spells deck? Okay, I would have played that deck if there's one that beats all 3. Maybe there's not one that beats all 3. Maybe just the blue-black mill deck is the best one, or you like the blue-red spells deck the best. Okay, that's fine. The next step is you're going to test these brood or your improved decks against these expected meta decks. You're not going to test these decks against each other. And we're going to talk about that a little bit below, but it doesn't do any good if I test my brew that's designed to beat blue-red spells against your brew that's designed to beat blue-black mill. We're just going to be wasting each other's time. We need to test against the decks we expect to face in the tournament, not against the decks that we are going to bring to beat that tournament. Sometimes those overlap, right? Sometimes everybody is targeting Endra, and you know that you're going to have to beat Combrei aggro as well as Endra. That's okay, but if your entire testing in is then you playing decks that beat Endra and Combrei against other decks that beat Endra and Combrei, you're wasting a lot of time and probably aren't going to meet your goals because you're spinning your wheels in this meta circle that you get. That's where inbred testing comes in. After you've identified, brainstormed, developed, and after you've tested, you want to make sure you record these results and discuss them regularly. This is a lot of the work. Testing and brewing the decks is obviously going to be the most of your time, but your non-playing time is going to be formed with discussing the decks and tweaking the deck list and discussing the results. And we're going to talk a little bit about those micro goals and the things you'll discuss down here in a little bit, but just know that doing the work of the testing and playing isn't enough. There's that next step of conversing and having a conversation about what you've been doing with your teammates after these things are over. Logic and reason should guide here the most. We all have a pet deck, we all have a pet card, and sometimes it's terrible, and sometimes it makes you really sad. And then depending on what your goals are, you might have to give that up. If your goal is just to have a blast in Eternal and grind through Gauntlet and make a bunch of gold, I don't have any problem with that, right? But if your goal is to say, hey, you know what, I want to do well in an ECQ, or I want to get to Masters, and these decks I play are continuously bad, you have to let your logic and reasoning guide here and say, okay, maybe I'm just missing the mark with this deck idea or this card idea. But now that we have this big picture, these big 5-step pictures that we have in mind, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the C and D part of the big picture steps here, steps 3 and 4. Every single game that you play in your testing practice should have a particular goal in mind. We talked about big picture goal up here, right? We said, you know what, we're going to develop our big idea, the thing that we want to tackle up here. What we're going to do down here is we're going to say, what do we need to do in the small moments to make sure that bigger goal can become a reality with our actual deck? There's a bunch of different small goals you can have with every single test game, and I've put some examples here, but you could probably develop your own. The most common one that I think I see people have is gain familiarity with a deck's basic strategy. Let's say it's your first time playing Endra. A deck's not particularly difficult once you know what you're doing, but you do need to kind of figure out how the pieces work together, right? Or maybe you have this mid-range deck and you need to figure out how the removal lines up and how you need to develop your mana. Another question you could ask is, all right, what is my deck's likelihood of winning in this matchup? Am I favored? Is Endra favored against Combray aggro? Hint, it's not, right? What cards are important in this matchup is another thing. Let's say I'm testing Blue-Black Mill against a Fire Justice Primal deck. What cards are important? Removal spells, right? For the Fire Justice Primal deck. And then Aegis spells and reanimates if you're the Blue-Black Mill deck. What cards simply don't pull their weight in this matchup? If you have a deck that beats Combray aggro and loses to Blue-Black Mill, we can go, okay, what cards don't pull their weight against Blue-Black Mill? And can we give some of those up and still be good against Combray aggro? Another big question be, am I winning? How am I winning the games I'm winning? Am I winning because of my deck's chock full of removal and I can ride one threat to victory? Or am I winning because of more intricate interactions in my cards? This is the biggest one. Is my deck even good? And that lines up next with the one of, why should I play my deck versus the best deck? If there's an established best deck in the room, you have to have a really good justification for why you're not playing it, depending on your goals. And again, I keep saying it depends on your goals because my goal set comes from a competitive background. If I want to day 2 in ECQ and maybe spike a qualifier for Worlds, right? These two questions are really important to me. But if your goals are something different, these questions might not be that important. This gain familiarity with my deck's basic strategy might be the most important. It's all kind of up to you, but I'm going to use that competitive goal as like the goal that I'm basing this paradigm off of. So this is the big micro testing procedures. Every time you fire up a game on ladder or against one of your test buddies, you should have a goal in mind for what am I trying to do in this game. In Eternal, it's a little bit more difficult to do these kind of things because in a paper game, you just say, okay, I really want to test this card in this matchup. Okay, well, my buddy will grab that deck and I'll grab the card I want and I can just start with it in my opening hand. But in Eternal, sometimes it's a little bit harder to need the cards you want and be in the situations where you draw them. For example, I want to test Boar against Blue-Black Mill and see how great it is. Well, I have to A, play against Blue-Black Mill, and then B, in a situation where Boar is good, and then C, be in a situation where not only is Boar good, I have the ability to draw it and play it. So it's a little bit more narrow in Eternal, but that's still the general idea. I didn't bold this, so that's a little ugly. Gross. Oh, I also didn't make it size 18. You guys, oh my gosh. Talk about being embarrassing. There's two big themes that we've talked about a little bit now, kind of in theory, but I want to be a little bit more specific are. There's conception decks and then there's meta decks. Meta decks are those that are well established, you know, the meta game. Blue-Black Mill, Combray aggro, blue-red spells. The big strength of playing these decks in your tournaments and in your ladder games is that you know your deck's good. There's no ambiguity about whether you're playing a list that's tried and true or not. Biggest weakness is that you have a target on your back. If you're playing the Indra deck, you might have the best deck in the room, but Combrei aggro is going to eat you alive. Likewise, though, the Conception decks are the bruise of the format. Their biggest strength is that it allows you to spike a tournament out of nowhere. You know what? Maybe you've just zoned in that decks A, B, and C are going to be the biggest decks in the room, and you have a deck that hoses all three of those. You do really well in your tournament or win it because you called it that day. That's the biggest strength there. Biggest weakness, though, is that sometimes you think, okay, the room's going to be full of decks A, B, and C, and the room was actually filled with decks D, E, and F. And then you just have egg on your face. You get destroyed. An important part about Conception decks versus meta decks, and why I bring it up, is that every player has to play both seats of the Conception and the meta deck side of the testing room. Your meta deck tester is more valuable than your Conception deck tester. Let's say I'm on a team with 3 people, and all 3 of us, well, let's use 4 people because even numbers are better for testing. Let's say all 4 of us have a Conception deck we want to try. Like we talked about earlier, if we don't have a meta deck player or players to test our Conception decks against, we're just going to get inbred testing and not get anywhere. It's very important that you have the people on your team that are dedicated to playing the meta decks, the decks that everyone's going to see. And everybody should take turns doing those. Everybody wants to play their brew, right? Everybody wants to do their hot thing. It's important, though, that you all take turns helping each other's decks improve. Not only does this make your buddy's deck better, it also makes you more familiar with the format and what cards are available to your opposing decks. Number 6 is track your data. I don't even have bullet points after this. It's just important that you write things down. None of this will be statistically relevant. You're not going to play enough games to figure out whether the math behind your games is a reasonable sample size. But it's important that you have a basis to start with. For example, the teams I'm on, we use Discord, we use Twitter to discuss and share our ideas and kind of keep an ongoing conversation. Oh, I played Blue Black Mill last night. I played 20 games. Here's what happened in them. What do you guys think? And someone go, oh, well, based on that, let's try this list out. That's an important part that doesn't have a lot of explanation, but tracking your data in some facet is important. And the last part that I didn't put on here, that I struggled whether I wanted to put on this outline or not, but I think I'm going to ultimately do so, is that you need to be open to constructive criticism. Sometimes you just have a bad idea. I've been guilty of having terrible ideas before and doing well with them, but still having the bad idea. It's important that my friends and teammates come along and say, hey, look, you got lucky this time. This deck idea, it's not good. It's really important that you have those people and that you're able to respond to that correctly and not be angry by it. Criticism must be constructive for it to be any good, but it's important that we don't just give up on constructive advice because it goes against our grain. Remember, at the end of the day, everything's about these goals right here. So if your friends are helping you get to your goals, even if it's a little bit more graded than you'd like, it's a good step. Anyway, I'd love to hear how people test in their games, what they think about this paradigm, if this was even helpful at all. If it was, do me a solid, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. If it was bad, hit the down button. Tell me why it was bad in the comments. If you ever want to talk more about testing theory, it's one of my favorite things about in card games to discuss. Come along to twitch.tv/I'mJerman on Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. Link down there. We also have a Discord if you want to talk about any of this stuff, and a link to this outline will be available as well. Thanks very much, and have a great day.